I don't know which one of the how many study groups it's been this year. We're starting to do a lot more of them. I don't know if every single week, but we're
It's
getting more
22.
frequent. 22. Welcome to the 22nd IQ study group. Thank you. Of 2025. Um, this I wanted to do one on building connectors. The timing is pretty good because we have we're revamping and re-energizing the open source community around some AI related connectors, the MuleSoft AI chain project. This isn't just about AI chain though. This is just in general building your own connectors with the Java SDK. So I thought I'd do a study group about what that is and the Java, because the Java SDK is surprisingly powerful. There's a lot of useful stuff in the documentation about how to do it, and I've got a couple of open source connectors I've built, so figure I could share that experience with you guys. And maybe if you have any, we'll see what questions come up. We've got a few interested people, co-studiers, so we'll see if we where it goes. I have a plan, and if we go off course, that's great. So yeah, so this is it. Let's see if I can get the slides to move. All right. Um, so it's a hands-on session. I figured we could see how far we get building a basic OpenAI chat connector. This is not a replacement for the MuleSoft AI chain or the inference connector, but it'll at least be a way to think about, what would a connector actually do, right? So one that'll chat with OpenAI, what thought would be a neat idea. So you bootstrap the connector using a Maven archetype, and that's going to be the basic. I'm going to show you the basic structure of the process. So if you want to start a whole new connector project, you have two choices. You could go take someone else's connector and delete all their stuff and make yours out of it, which is a lot of trouble, and it's not as it's not as easy as you think to tear everybody else's code out and then put yours in. So the archetype generates a basic project, and it has its own challenges because it's not perfect when it first comes out of the archetype. But anyway, the archetype takes you through a question and answer kind of interactive prompt process. I'm going to show you that. These days, you want to use Java 17, and that means I'm just giving you a tip. SDK version 1.9.7. We're going to go set that stuff up and do it ourselves. And then without tests, because I have an issue when the archetype first generates it, the test running has some kind of error that I haven't figured out yet. But anyway, when you first generate it, your tests aren't that good. So, that's a good start. And so let's go do it. I'm going to link in the chat. The Mule SDK documentation is here on the Mule website. There's a Java SDK. You click on the top link. This is it, getting started. And if you wanted to follow along, you can just do it. In the chat, that's the link. Use the archetype generate command to create an extension project. So I'm going to go do one. So that would be it. You can paste it, and you don't need to change anything. You can do it as is. To run archetype generate, it's going to look like this. It's going to ask you a few questions. If you're building this connector for open source, then your group ID can be anything you want. It to be only published inside your enterprise, then you're going to want to use your business group ID for exchange as for the connector. I'm surprised it's not doing anything yet. Okay, that's really slow. It finally popped up. It says, what's the name of the extension you want to build? The convention is mule-something-connector, all right? That tends to be what we do with all the connectors, mule-whatever-connector. So I'm going to do study group -OpenAI connector, right? And see, it's asking questions, right? So the group ID I'm going to pick is quest.integration because I work at Integration Quest. And I usually do something like Mule, right? So it's in a group ID, and that would be used for publishing to Maven Central, which I plan on doing for my connectors because I usually build open source connectors. So that's where you would put your business group ID if you were publishing to your own exchange, right? And then the artifact ID is going to be the same as the name of the extension. Actually, that's not right because the artifact ID has this. So I think I typed the wrong. I'm going to hit Control-C and cancel. See, so you can always do that. Because I want to use the connector name that I see in Anypoint Studio, right? So let's go back in here. And I want this is the name, the one that'll show up in the Mule. That's what I want to do. So let me switch workspace. You're going to want Anypoint Studio up for testing your connector for this. So if you want to launch Anypoint Studio now, that wouldn't hurt. I think I have a study group workspace. Let's go to the study group workspace. There we go. So I'm going to start the archetype again. And this time I'm going to put study group OpenAI as the name of the extension. That's better. And now it's going to be quest.integration.mule. And I'll put Mule study group OpenAI connector. And the version, I just leave the default empty for default. And off it goes. It's generating a Mule project for you. I mean, a Mule connector project. You're going to want a Java IDE. I'm using IntelliJ IDEA. That's not the only kind there is, but that's what I use. So once it loads up the project, I like to make a couple of changes before I open it in my IDE the first time. That might just be my superstition, though. You might be able to do it all inside the IDE. I'm actually surprised. My computer's fans are going hard right now. Maybe I need to quit Zoom or something. I don't know. I didn't expect it. I'm getting a high CPU usage detected thing. Let's see. That doesn't look too bad, though. My cores are not at max. Huh. Anyway. It's generating.
I think you still need to enter this, right?
Oh, the main package. Thank you for that. No wonder. Because I heard the fans, I thought it was running. You're right. So the main package, I'm also going to do quest.integration .mule .openai. I'll just do that. Thank you. Good catch. Done. Build success. So we've now got a connector built. And what I'll probably do is I'll open it in Visual Studio Code first so that I can edit the pom.xml file. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I'm building it with Java 17, and I want to make sure I'm using the right version of the, what is that running? The Mule mod parent. So what that means is the SDK version is selected by choosing a Maven parent project version. That's where you put the 1.9.7. So where did Visual Studio? Is it in Cursor? I thought I did code. Well, anyway, it opened in Cursor, but I'm not going to use chat. We're just going to edit the pom.xml, and you see you have the Mule modules parent, and that's using SDK version 1.1.10, but that's not what I want. I want 1.9.7, and the reason is, I'll show you why. There's been a lot going on with Java versions in the Mule world these days. So when you build it, it'll have selecting a SDK version, link in the documentation, and it says the version. Where is it? See, there's two conflicting things. This one says use 1.1.6, and it also kind of says you want to use the minimum version, but that's not the documentation I'm talking about. There's another one in here that tells you what the minimum versions are for the Java version. Is it module structure? Or see, I found this in the documentation last night. Okay, here it's in the bottom of the module structure section. There's a link in the documentation to Java version support. And what I found this last night, it says Java compatibility is based on the Mule SDK version, right? No, that's not it. I want the parent. No, is it Java? I have to find the. Parent version limit. Is it in C also? I bet you it's in C also. Changing version. Java SDK. SDK Java 17 Mule modules parent. See where I found this. Upgrading Java for custom connectors. Oh, it's in getting started. Upgrade your custom configuration properties. Okay. There we go. Java 17. Where does it say it? It's the parent version that I need. Target compilation level. Yeah, there's where I found it. 17, you have to upgrade the Mule modules parent to 1.9.0 or later. And then Java 11 was 1.6, and then, so we all need to be on Java 17 now because Mule is 17. So 1.9.7 is the one I found that's the latest. So I'm going to save that pom.xml right there. I'm going to put this link for the, there we go. I'm going to put this link in the chat for the actual Java version. So, that way it's not just trust the video. There's the actual link. And we can put that in the description of the YouTube video also. Good. All right, so now we've got that. And the next step is to make sure you're using Java-version. Make sure you're using Java 17 to do your Maven run, right? If you're not, you want to change your Java home to wherever the JDK is that's for Java 17. And then you can run Maven -d skip tests, clean, and you're going to use package to see if it'll actually build. Mine did not. It would be good to be in the actual folder where your project is. Let's try that again. So you need Maven installed, of course, to make this work. I'm not too impressed with the speed of command line on my machine. The Maven command is surprisingly slow today. There we go. Took a little while to get started. Great. So it build success means that Maven's happy with my POM file. So that's enough to open it up. I'm going to close this cursor IDE. I'm going to open it in IntelliJ IDEA. That's the one I've been using for my connector development. I endorse JetBrains products, and I do not insist on them. If you have a different IDE that you're fond of, more the merrier. So let's go to my IQ. Study group, SDK, there we go. So we're going to open the new connector folder as a project in IntelliJ.
Although the community version should be enough for this, right?
Yeah, I have Ultimate, but you don't need Ultimate. All right, it's open. And let's see. There we go. So it's doing the plugin, it's doing the Maven thing in here. And I have a tip I'm going to put in here. We're going to do it. We're just going to use it exactly as is. But I want you to change one thing. I would suggest I want my 1.0.0 to mean something, right? So I usually start at 0.0.0 version when I do a connector, and then I'll work my way up. And I'm only going to 1.0.0 when I'm ready for other people to use my connector, right? And you can make whatever version policy you want. But I changed mine to 0.0.0. And you're going to expand the source folder and see what we got. It's not being responsive. My computer's so zippy usually. I think it's the video. What just happened there? You saw that? There we go. There's the source folder. And you can see all the code it generated for you. And I'm going to give you guys I got a couple of slides about what those are. But this is the base scaffolded connector project. And now, let me do a little bit of lecture about that part, I suppose. We now have a connector project started. So connectors are made out of a few essential basic, the highest level classes inside your connector project. They have certain jobs, and these are the main ones you need to pay attention to. They were like this. This is straight out of the module structure page in the documentation. So you're creating a module. A module is an extension, and a connector is a module. All of those three things are related. The module has to do what makes something a module is the annotations on the classes, and I'm going to show you how we code that. Right. So modules have configurations, and you can have multiple configurations in a module. Right. Configurations can be attached to connection providers, which those give your connector the connections it needs to actually run. Right. Parameters are used by configurations, and they're also used by connection providers. All of this stuff is used to give the user, which the user is the Mule developer, right? It gives the user something it can configure in your global elements in their application, right? That's how you set all the settings for your connector to give it away. For our case, you're going to have to have a key to access OpenAI. So you're going to go all the way with this example. I would suggest going on platform.openai.com and getting an API key ready to go. And then all the actual stuff your connector does are these components, the operations and the routers, and we're gonna do an operation here to get this working, right? So that's the main module structure. So the extension, this is the front end. You're gonna do all of your top level, naming your connector, defining an icon, and then linking to all the other stuff happens at the extension level. A configuration is where you put the API key and any other settings that you need for your connector. And then the connection it's not a design time, it's a runtime thing. So when the application's running, the connection is what actually gets given to your code so that you can use it and go actually make the connector do what it's supposed to do. And then each of the operations, those are going to receive the connection and do something, right? So the operation is what gets dropped onto the canvas in AnyPoint Studio, right? So when you look at our example connector that we just, here it is. Why don't I make this full screen? Yeah. We have kind of all those things. So I usually do a little bit to get started. I want to show you also the fact that the default archetype, it gave us a internal package. And that tells you something about the class loader. Classes that are internal are not exposed to the Mule application. You have to keep your packages, your Java packages, separate for classes that you expect the Mule app to actually use, and those are exposed in your interfaces. And everything else should be internal. You want to keep as much internal. Your extension class can be internal. Now, I don't like the default naming that comes with these things, but I'm not going to change it yet. I have a step for that, right? So when you first make a connector, you're going to get all these little comments everywhere that say, this is your main class. It tries to tell you about what everything is, which is nice your first time in, but you don't need to keep those comments. It just tells you basically what I had on my slide, right? So we're going to get rid of that. And the XML annotation, this is what's going to actually be used. The prefix, that's going to be used in your, that's what will show up in your XML code, right? And that's way too long, right? So I'm going to make this OpenAI, right? Before the colon that's the XML namespace in your Mule XMLs, right? The extension name, this came from when we did our archetype interview. You can change that now if you want. And then you see there's a configurations annotation, and that actually refers to your configuration class. You don't need to put any code in your extension class. The main point of it is to be the home for all of these annotations. Okay. So I'm about to renew it, but I'm about to start changing stuff. But I wanted to look at these different what came out of the box first. So something is unpleasant with the speed of my machine. I'm used to it being so snappy. Let's see. Look at that. What is getting my CPU so bad? Whatever kernel task is. Huh. I'll live with it. It's fine. There, that's better. Okay, cool. So we want the configuration class though. So this is going to be used in your this is going to be used in your Anypoint Studio as a global element, right? You can make a configuration and it'll show up. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that and comment, right? And this will be, we're going to rename all these classes, but you put parameters in here that you want the user to fill out. And they have a name and they have a value. And when they fill them out, they're going to be populated in this class. So, and then the connection provider can also have parameters. So you can choose which parameters belong on the configuration and which one belong on the configuration provider. I would just default everything to the configuration until you have a good reason, and then we can look at what the difference is. You see there's actually code here now. The connection provider has a way to make, so you have a connect function that returns a connection, and you have a disconnect function that accepts a connection and lets you turn it off, right? And this is called by when the application's starting up to make a connection for your actual operation to use. Connection provider is one of several types. This is a pooling connection provider. That's what it did default. You could use cache connection provider, which is my favorite. I'm not gonna change it now, but there's 3 different connection provider types, and this just with how many connections do we want the application to use while it's running. A cache connection provider is just going to be like one. Like pooling connection provider has more complexity to it. It's the one it picked for us, and then plain old connection provider doesn't have any logic to it. It just every time a connection is asked for, it makes a connection, right? So there's good documentation about all this connection management in your in the SDK docs. So as you go through the process of building, you don't need to read all these docs ahead of time. The way I recommend doing it is you get to the point where you need to deal with a connection, and then you go read the connections doc here, and they're not very long, right? They're just maybe a couple of pages. What a connection is. This is what I need to do with the code, and it tells you very directly what do I do with my connections and how do I code them. So when we get to that point, we'll do it. So good. That's the connection, and then the last part, the most important part, the part everybody came here for is the operations. This is where you actually make your connector do stuff, right? So each one of the methods in your operations class is going to become an operation in the when the connector is installed. So I want to show how that's wired up. Where did the operations class come from? Well, on the configuration, we have an operations annotation, right? And that tells the configuration that the operations that are being referenced require this particular configuration to work, right? And all of that to say, let's just go, we're going to install this in Anypoint and see it work before we make any changes at all, so that we can take all this I'm telling you in like language, you can just go see it in Anypoint Studio. So we don't have to change anything. You could just go straight to your terminal and do mvn-d skip tests install, and it's going to go put the connector code into your I'm going to put a slide up. That'll put it into your local Maven repository, right? So I think I may have gone out of my order here. We're going to do all those things in a minute. No, let me go back. I want the installation part. There we go. We're going to build the connector jar. So we just did that. We ran, I'm going to do the command again so you can see what I did. It had problems anyway. Oh, good. Not supported by the lowest declared Java version support. So Java-version. I'm on 24, so I need to make my Java home number 17. And then before I go fix that, I'm going to give you the command again. You should get the same error I did. -d skip tests and install. This is going to put it in your your local Maven repository. Hey, Maz, how you doing, man? I'm glad to see you. Well, I don't hear you, but I don't know if everybody else does. Yeah, I saw the note in the chat though. So that's how you're going to install it. All right, so it's not going to work because it gave me a warning about my my Java version, my supported Java versions, right? So let's go fix that. First of all, I'll go to the documentation for it. That's here. Java version support. We need to specify that this is only going to support Java 17, right? If I want to support all of them, I need to build with the lowest one, right? I could do, right? But I'm just saying that our connector is Java 17 only, right? So we're going to put the Java version support annotation on the extension that we're having here. So at Java version support. And I think I have to make an array, right? Is that what it said? Yeah, an array. So you make an array with curly braces, Java version dot Java 17. There we go. All right. And now we should be able to run install again. Now I got to build success, right? So once you get the jar of your connector built and installed, you can see what happened was it copied it into my local Maven repository right here, users rhag.m2 repository. There it is, right? So that means I can now use it from my application. So let's go see, right? I'll go into Anypoint Studio. And here's where I'm going to tell you why the little tip about Maven versions. Testing this, all right? This is going to be my project, right? Finish. And I'm getting this brand new Mule project so that I can add the connector to it and then see what it looks like in my designer. The goal of connector development is two things. I want it to be able to function. That's one thing. And I also want to be able to see it to have a good interface for the developer. That's two things, right? So we're going to do both of those. I'm going to add. Okay, so you can't, because I didn't put it in Exchange, we're not going to add it using the GUI method. We're going to do it using direct pom.xml file changes. So here we go. I'm going to go to my dependencies in my POM, and we're going to use the group ID. Which is quest.integration.mule. And we're going to use the artifact ID, capital I, which is Mule study group, right? Open AI connector. And you have to use the version that matches what went into your local repository. So for me, that was 0.0.0-snapshot, the whole version, including the word snapshot, right? So version 0-0-0, oops, dot 0.0-snapshot. Now that's not enough. It needs to have the classifier Mule plugin also. So let's add that. And see what happens. And if you succeed, the first thing you'll notice is that your plugin will pop up on the package explorer in your on the left side. And if this is your first connector, it's a good time to celebrate and go get a coffee or something, because you just built a connector that showed up in your Anypoint Studio project. That's fun, right? All right. So now what are we going to do with it? I'm going to close everything and see what my connectors like to use. So it will show up in my Mule palette over here, study group OpenAI. And there's two operations. I don't know where those came from, except I do. But if this was my first time making it, not know where those operations came from. Retrieve info and say hi, right? So there's say hi. I dragged it onto the canvas and it went into a flow. And it has a person field. All of that came from operations that were automatically included in the connector that I didn't want, right? So once I've reached the milestone of being able to bring the project into Anypoint Studio, I now have the issue of I need to make changes to the connector and see them in Anypoint Studio. And here's where Maven snapshots fail you, because I had a lot of trouble updating a snapshot and reinstalling a snapshot and having to close Anypoint Studio and open Anypoint Studio and get it to load the new snapshot version connector in my studio. So my practice that I built was that I'm not going to use snapshot versions. It's just every time I want to build a new version, I update the version to a real version and I install that. And then that way there's always a different version number every time I test it in Anypoint Studio. So this is not required. It's just I'm recommending it. I think it's a good way to, a good rhythm you get in working on connector is you start with a hard version. I'm using 0.0.0 and I think I got up to like 0.0.180 on one project, just over updating new version numbers, because I kept making changes and wanting to see them in Anypoint Studio. So that's the first cleanup activity I would recommend. So just to give a little guidance about where we're going here. Not that one. Yeah, so now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the boilerplate code and make a config to give the connector our API key and have an operation to send a chat message. So it's a simple connector, right? So now I think it's really important when you first start the connector to get it organized and cleaned up the way you want it to be, okay? So that's what we're going to do. Before we get to the config class, first we're going to go back in our project, and I recommend, I have settled on a naming convention that I like to use, and I don't know if the rest of the MuleForge community is going to like it or not, but I don't need all these prefixes on my classes. So I don't even call it OpenAI. I'm just going to call my extension class extension. Right. So and I do that. I just take all the I don't like all the extra words. So I don't know what's going on with my Anypoint with my idea editor these days. It's like locked up. All right, extension, and I'm going to rename the class. There we go. So this is the study group extension class. It's about to get renamed, right? So rename, refactor, rename, and I'm just going to call it extension. Right? And I know I'm going to need a configuration. So the next thing I'm going to do is rename my configuration too. Now, IDEA is pretty good at doing, that's why I'm using refactor rename. I don't have to do text and run all over the place and fix things, right? So I'm going to rename the configuration class to, you guessed it, configuration. I would use a different name if I was going to have multiple global elements. I might give them different names. But since I only have one, it can get a name just configuration. It's fine, right? Simple. All right. And I'm also going to do the same thing with my connection provider, and my operations, because I only have one in my project and I have no reason to put all these silly prefixes on them. Now, I've noticed sometimes when I do this very simple naming, I end up with class name conflicts. Like, look at my extension class. What I ended up with now is, because I named the class extension, the annotation has to use this long package prefix on it. I think it's worth it. I'm going to leave it. I think it's worth it, even though there's a name collision. I'm fine with that. And I'm not fine with this recording software making my editor so slow. Okay, so let's rename my connection class to just plain old connection. And my connection provider. And my operations. And operations does need to be plural because we're going to have a bunch of them in there. Actually, we're not. We're going to have just one, but that's the purpose of the class, is a container for multiple operations. Yeah, that's fine. All right. Now I've got all of my my classes renamed. The next thing is to take the junk out. So I know on my operations class, I had say hi and what was the other one? Say hi and retrieve info. Those, I'm getting rid of those. I don't need those operations. Looks like the actual OpenAI calls are going to be a homework assignment for you guys. Looking at the time, we'll see though. Operations, okay. Example of an, yeah, we don't need any of these. I'm just going to smoke all of them. Just goodbye, operations. I don't need any of you guys. So I just have an empty operations class, which is fine because I'm going to put my chat message operation in here after cleaning everything else up. Cool. Same thing with the configuration. It has a config ID that I don't need. So we're going to get rid of that too. You know, I probably just make my own archetype at this point because I do this every time, right? And the connection class has junk on it that I don't need either. So I'm going to take out all of those. And I suppose I could leave the invalidate. We're going to use the Mule HTTP module. So good. Now I'm kind of cleaned up, right? And the test, OpenAI operations test case. This is made to load a. I like the test case because it loads a Mule config using the connector and actually makes sure it works. Of course, this isn't going to work. I just don't. So I'm going to clean out the test Mule config. Looks like since I changed this, I need to back up, make it use my actual namespace. That's cleaning up. And do that here too. Wow. The sluggish computer is not what I expected. It's usually not sluggish, but I'm going to try turning off the video. It keeps giving me a recommendation. See if that makes any difference. I don't see it making much difference. Okay. Oh, now we're good. Okay, maybe that did make a difference. So I'm going to change. I'm going to make this match. What I'm making it do in this this XML is I'm making it match the XML prefix I put on the extension class. I want that to be the same here. And I have to do that here too. So there's that. There's this one. And there's this one. So that should be all of it. Good. And then I have to do that to the config, which I'm going to keep the config. So I could just delete it, but I'm not going to delete it. I'm going to get rid of the required parameter on the connection. I'm going to get rid of the config ID here. And I'm going to get rid of these flows that I don't need. There. Nice and clean now. Right? But that reminded me of one more change I need to make. So the connection class also, no, I got rid of it. Connection provider. Aha. There's the connection provider. That needs cleaned up. The required parameter is going away. And new connection. Huh. No, maybe I just need to take out. I took out the constructor too, so we'll just take out the argument. I don't need an optional parameter. Beautiful. I like to start from clean. Beautiful. All right, good. Last thing I'll do is this test case. I don't need any tests until I have something to test. So I'm going to get rid of those. All right. Now we're clean. Maybe I can even refactor, rename that test class. There. It's always nice to start clean. So what are we going to start? We're going to start with the operation we want to make, I think, which is, oh, why don't we start with actually, I made a plan, so I'd be ready for this. We're going to go implement our chat operation. And first thing we're going to have to do is have some place to put our API key for authentication, right? And we know that. I'm going to close all these files. That's going to go in our configuration, right? Now, it's a good, there's a subtle difference between configuration class and connection provider class, and you could kind of see it in the test mule config. Configuration parameters go on the config itself, and the connection provider ones go on the internal connection class. So if there were going to be different ways to connect to OpenAI, it might make sense to put it on the connection class. That this will turn into the connection provider class. I'm sorry. But we don't have that in any different ways. Right now, we're just going to make one way. So it's not too hard to migrate later. So I'm going to add a string API key to my configuration class. And we're going to annotate that parameter. And that's it. That's enough to go rebuild and put it in Anypoint Studio and see what happened. Right. So let's do that. So I just can rerun. Maven clean -d skip tests install. And we'll go to Studio. This is getting faster without the audit, without the video. I don't really like turning my video off in these meetings, but hey, if it makes my machine not lock up, I got something to figure it out afterwards. And we're going to go to the pom.xml and just change the version of our study group OpenAI connector to the whatever one we just built, which in my case was 0.0.0, and save it. And now when I go back to my palette, my study group OpenAI connector, I have no operations available. Okay, that's good. I deleted all my operations, right? We'll go to the global elements and press create connector config. Aha, I have a study group OpenAI config. I can press OK. And there's an API key to fill out here. So you can go take your API key and paste it in here. Now, this is clear text, and we don't like that, right? So what if we try to make that get masked? That's something you can go look up in the documentation. and it's very well written. So let's do that. I think I have it here. Yeah. So in documentation, you're going to find under the module structure, the very first one says parameters, right? And it'll tell you how to set up your parameters, including if they're Java types, and you can kind of skip over some of the stuff that you aren't using yet. We could turn on expression support. That's the little f of x toggle that lets you put data weave in there. I'm not going to do that here. You could make it optional. Ours is not optional. And where's the one for parameter type restrictions? Is that it? No, not that one. So I want to make there's a flag to make the parameter be masked. I thought it would be on this one under modifiers. Optional. Well, I did find it. I wonder if I just found it by. I remember what it is. I hate to not let you have a way to find these things out yourself. The one way I found things that are not in the documentation is I go look at the source code of MuleSoft connectors, and I think I might have found this one in the source code. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it masked. I think it's called @password, right? No, is it password or? Yeah, there it is. And you can tell it's from the Mule SDK because there's two of them there. We don't use the org.mule.sdk package names. We use the org.mule.runtime ones. So if I put @password on it, now I'm just going to rebuild so we can see what the difference is. And this is where you start to run out of version numbers. You use so many version numbers. So I'm going to go to the POM, make it a 0.0.1, and rebuild it after putting password on there. And then I can go back in Anypoint Studio and update my POM to 0.0.1. Save. And now my connector was loaded. If I hit edit, now my password is masked. You can hit show password or hide password. Now we're on the way, right? So that's where we put the API key. Now the test connection button would be probably one of the next things I would do. But I don't want to use the rest of our study group. I'm almost to the end. So there's a way to make that test connection button work. Instead, I want to kind of skip ahead to the operations so that you can fill in the other steps kind of on your own, or maybe we have another class or study group or something. So we're going to define the chat operation for the prompt, right? So go to your operations class, and we're going to add a very simple public string send chat message, and it takes a string prompt, right? So I just made a little function, and this needs to go to OpenAI, right? And there are some annotations for operations. Display name is one of them, so I could name it, whatever. It doesn't have to it'll make a name out of this method name, or I could put one and make it say what I want it to say, which is like custom name, but I'm not going to do that, right? But I think just that much is all I need to do. So I will return fake response from OpenAI and rebuild it as 0.0.2. Wait, I guess I need a semicolon. Try that again. Oh, okay, you're right. It's giving me a good warning. Hey, it says it's going to return a string type, but it doesn't specify a default MIME type. This is normal. Operations can return custom objects, or they can return something that's serializable, like a string or a byte array or something or an object. So when you do have those, you need to tell Mule what the media type is. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to say text/plain, and there's a strict equals false, in which case the user can configure what the media type is, I'm not going to make this one be like that. I'm going to make this one be strict equals true, and that way the user doesn't get to say. It's definitely text plain, right? So there we go. And I'll show where that shows up. I ended up, when you have data that's unstructured, sometimes you want to do the opposite there. So now I built 0.0.2, right? Wait. Yeah, we'll do number 2. It loaded my connector. And now, if we go to the study group, now we have a send chat message operation, right? And we can drag it into our flow. And here's the prompt. This is whatever I want to send to the LLM, right? And what you don't see on the left side is a MIME type menu because I decided to make it strict equals true. So you don't get to say what the MIME type is of the response, right? Man, we're already at an hour. I think I'm gonna keep going because I think we want to do the HTTP module stuff. If you're gonna build one of these after study group and get back to me and show me how cool your work is, I want you to have this piece because you can do it wrong, and it's worth doing this part right. So when you're building HTTP based connectors for Mule, you want to use the Mule HTTP client because Mule has a very good and very performant HTTP client built into Mule. And if you just use java.net.url, you're not going to get that. So that's in the best practices section. And as your connector gets further along, you're going to spend more and more time down here in the best practices section, reading tips and tricks for making your connector better, right? So the Mule HTTP client is injected. It's using dependency injection. All that means is you declare the field and then you ask nicely for Mule to go populate it for you, and it will, right? So we're going to put a HTTP service in there, and we're going to do all of this setup for the HTTP client, and it's worth it, right? So we're going to use the lifecycle phases of start and stop so that we can have our client be started and stopped also, and it has to have a name, right? And I'm going to hard code that for now. We'll come back to there's a lot of best practices in here that I would like to spend time on, but it'll make it take too long. So first, we're going to get an HTTP service, right? And we're also going to, yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right, so let's go back to our code, and we're going to go into our connection provider because I want the connections to do the HTTP stuff, right? And does this have a relationship to the configuration? It does not. So since it does not, I want to use the API key from the configuration. So I'm now going to move my API key out of my configuration class into my configuration provider class because I know I need it here, right? I want to be able to get to it here. So I'm doing that. How do I format in IntelliJ? I hate that. Code, clean up. Right, please do that. What is it? Code. I'm going to have to let go of it. Reformat code. There we go. Thank you. Whew. Sure, yeah, I'll put it on a GitHub repo, but I want you to build it yourself, though. There's something about doing it by hand that gets you moving, and you get faster and faster and faster every time. So I do suggest kind of going through it anyway. But yeah, I'll share it, of course. Yeah, of course. Good. So let's inject the HTTP service. Okay, so this is my connection provider. I'm going to do @inject my HTTP service. And I'm going to have to import the class. So now I have an HTTP service, and I'm going to have a start and a stop. All right, that's what. Let me make sure I'm following this thing. The this is my connection provider, right? So we're going to override start and we're going to override stop. And I think it's, yeah, that's it. There's a generate code here. Override methods is the very first one. So IntelliJ's doing some of the work for me. I'm going to do, where's start and stop? I don't like this code example anymore. Oh, yeah, good question. I don't always think cache connection provider is my favorite. It's the simplest because it's just going to only have one connection. It's not going to have lots and lots of. Now that might be bad. You might want to have a pool, but I like to go start with simple and only upgrade to complex when I need to. Why don't I have a start and stop though? Yeah, have a good weekend, Muzz. I'm just trying to. This is a catch for. Oh, I have to tell it. It implements startable and stoppable. So if you want Mule to actually hook into your component in its start phase or its stop phase, you have to ask for it by implementing the interfaces. I forgot that. Yeah. So we're going to add startable and stoppable. And then we're going to implement those two methods. There we go. And I don't like them at the bottom. So I'm going to move them up about where I was trying to put them in the first place. Good. And then the documentation kind of says we're going to do a initialize if needed TLS context. Is there a such thing as that? Oh, it's just trying to. This is the TLS context factory. I think when I did this last, I found out you do have to do the whole TLS context bit. I'm just going to get it started, you know. So I'm going to leave out the TLS context. This line is how you get a client configuration in there. HTTP client configuration. Right. I'm going to have to do that myself. So, yeah. Where is it declared? It's not declared. So the last time I did this, I'm going to open my other project and cheat, just because I have it here. It's that I wish I could do the whole thing in just with the documentation, but on the Whisper connector, I already did this, so I'm going to go look at it. OpenAI connection provider has an HTTP client. Oh, so I made an HTTP client field and an HTTP service field and a TLS context field. I needed all three. The Whisper connector is on any point cloud, so you can look at it right now. So when we started, what did I do? The create client configuration is here. Okay, good. So I'm just going to copy paste this one. It's going to need the whole TLX context factory, isn't it? So for the video, I'm going to say trust, and we're going to say we do the whole HTTP client part. But what we want to do is be able to create a new connection and pass the HTTP client into the connection, right? And then the connection is going to have all of the actual work to build a request and send it and get a response back. You do all of that with the Mule HTTP client. Like here's one right here. Now this is the more, I'm going to do a simpler one. Maybe if we do another chapter with the study group one, because we don't need to go to all this trouble with non-blocking in the very first thing. But this is what it looks like to make an HTTP request. Isn't it easier in Mule? The reason it's easier in Mule is somebody did all this work in Java, and now you guys can help too do all this work in Java. So I'm going to leave that as a homework assignment or to-do item for the reader. And that's how you use the HTTP client to do the OpenAI call. And then we return the response back to Mule for processing. So I think that's what I wanted to show, and I don't want to get tangled up in the code for the just for the HTTP client part. I want to talk about these best practices before we go. After you've built your connector and added your unit tests, there's a couple of best practices I want you to put at the front of your list. So after you've got the HTTP request working, you can actually see the chat message come back in your Mule application. My prediction is you'll have that working in something like in 30 minutes to an hour and a half. It's not even half a day before you get your first OpenAI message back. But next, you want to actually have metadata and data sense and errors. And these are I would say put errors first, and then put metadata second, and then go look at the best practices list. Those are very important add-ons to your connector. Mule errors are way better than Java errors. So the developer experience is terrible if you don't do the Mule errors properly. And then it's also pretty bad if you don't have metadata. So high priority after getting a working connector is going to be errors and then metadata, and then go shopping through the best practices list and see which ones you think are next for you. For me, I really was interested in non-blocking, so I went for that one. Now, publication, there's two choices, right? The way I designed it is publication to Maven Central. So if you're going to do open source development like I'm doing with MuleSoft Forge, the release goes to central.sonatype.com, and you have to sign up for an account here. And I'll show you kind of how that goes. I think I've been migrating to my new Google identity. I've had the old RHEG for like over a decade. And you're going to have namespaces attached to your user ID in Central. So these are all these namespaces I can do. Apparently, here's quest.integration right here. So this is a namespace quest.integration. And we can put artifacts in Maven Central under this one by publishing through central.sonatype.com. That's how you put a connector out there for the whole world, but not through MuleSoft Anypoint Exchange. If you want to do it through Exchange, you have to change the group ID, and then you have to distribute the jar file using the Maven deploy plugin to Anypoint Exchange and use your authentication, just like doing that with when you do a Cloud Hub 2.0 deployment. It's the same thing, except in this case, it's using the extensions plugin. So I want to encourage you guys to try making a connector. And then we're just at the beginning of this. Today was the announcement, so we haven't got all the details figured out, but MuleSoft Forge is an open source community where we're collecting all the open source developers for MuleSoft connectors, and we're going to try to have tutorials and ways for everybody to jump in, and just maybe you don't have to start from scratch. You can pick up a connector and make an enhancement or something. All of these concepts we covered today are going to be very helpful getting in and knowing what you're doing anyway. But I think building one from scratch is probably the most, something about, for me, doing it with your hands on, I learned the most. So I really hope to see more people make cool connectors, and we can share each other's code and make Mule do a whole lot more things than it does out of the box. So yeah, so that was how much as I prepared for today, and I hope to see a couple of OpenAI connectors work. So if you want to brag about it, hit me on LinkedIn, and I'll reshare your post if you can get a connector up there on your GitHub. I'm going to put this one on the Integration Quest GitHub right where I am now, like I promised. So I'll take this as kind of an example connector getting started, and I'll make a GitHub repo. In fact, I'll do it now so you guys have a link to it, because you came to the study group, right? So I'll go to Integration Quest, and I'm going to create a repository. We have a few already, but this will be a public repository. So this will be study group, connector. I'll just say, yeah, study group OpenAI connector, right? It's not exactly finished, right? But it's what we started. And make this to be public. Create the repository. So I will be putting this code here after the study group. The link is in the chat, so now you can bookmark it or follow it. If you go on GitHub with this link, you can hit the star button, and you'll be able to find it in your stuff. There is both of those things. The Slack channel in the community is only for AI Chain. Um, I'm about to move all this to Anypoint Cloud. The question is there some idea share of connectors that people need? So I started that 2 years ago on Anypoint Cloud, and it's only my ideas, but I'd love more of them. So under Anypoint Cloud, under repositories, I made one for the GitHub, the Anypoint Cloud.github.io, and I've started putting a bunch of connector ideas. So I'll put this here. And I don't know if you have more of them, but these are the ones I started putting in. Hey, I wish I had this. Hey, I wish I had that. So there's a few in here that that I've listed, and some of them MuleSoft already made one, so maybe you don't want to do that one. But if you had more, you could put a new issue here. Whenever we get this moved over to MuleSoft Forge, we're probably going to have a new place, but I'll migrate all this data over. So it's a way to think of. And if you have, I haven't thought of everything. What other ideas can you think of? For connectors we should have. So good question. Yeah. So, well, thanks for coming to the study group. And let's see your connectors.